Hello Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone who was completely caught off guard by that Brother Dusk scene. And today, we're going to be breaking down Foundation Season 3, Episode 7. We began in the Outer Reach on one of the far edge planets, that being Rossum. Now this planet does actually have some ties to the books, but I'll get more into how exactly later in the video. This essentially is setting up the Mule's backstory and how he actually got to the point that he's at today. And by the end of the episode, we realize this is sort of telling us how he actually became the Mule and potentially his first time using his powers. We'll go ahead and go through this segment of the story first before we go through the rest, and I want to say I really enjoyed the actual setup for this. Something I really enjoyed about this episode in particular is they had quite a few scenes that they could have called cliche in a certain sense, but they tackled in a very unorthodox way. The first being this entire scene with the Mule, with his attempt to actually escape his dad, and the struggle before they eventually got to the point where the Mule used his powers to save himself. This was a very interesting scene, and with his dad immediately falling into the water, it kind of made me think of Tellum back in Season 2, and there was some key differences in this scene. The Mule, as a child, didn't ask his parents to drown themselves, and we've never seen it indicated with his power usage before that somebody passes out when he's using his powers. Back in Season 2, Tellum knocked Salvor out by kind of churning her hand, similar to the Emperor. Interestingly enough, we only got to that point because Foundation had enacted a one-child policy against presumably all the Outer Reach planets, and I can almost guarantee that same policy wasn't enacted with most of the planets closer to Foundation or New Terminus. Either way, when the Mule does use his powers, you can hear whispering before he ends up tapping into their minds. He does supposedly end up returning his younger sister to their neighbors, but the scene is immediately followed up with left-handed Harry questioning how much of this story is actually accurate. And while it's likely we'll get a twist on the scene later on and a reveal for what actually went down, in my opinion, even if we don't get a visual change, whatever he was hearing in that mind could have been a Mentalic nearby spotting everything go down. Either way, there's definitely more to that scene. We then cut back to the chaos on New Terminus with Torin attempting to get Beta to safety. I'm still kind of confused why Beta specifically got knocked out so heavily compared to everybody else due to the null field. Unless, of course, there's more to that aspect of the story. Either way, this leads to Mayor Ember giving away Han Pritchard as his leader of information, and we get yet another weird glimpse, along with several throughout the episode, of Scarlet. We then cut to Brother Dude trying to convince Song of who he actually is and that he's telling the truth. Either way, I'm really enjoying the Mycogen storyline as it feels more focused on Foundation's lore. Then we cut back to Brother Dusk and Quint. And with how supportive Brother Dusk was being towards Quint and how much he actually cared for what he was enduring as well, it really does make you think that this is a couple worth rooting for. And while they're having their cute little moment, Brother Dude is suffering ego death in the hell of Trantor. I did a video breaking down more of how Brother Day ended up sort of becoming Brother Dude. So if you want to hear me break down more of what probably led Brother Dude to this vision, feel free to check out this video. It's during these hallucination scenes that we get a glimpse of Brother Dude when he was talking with Demerzel as a child. We get a full reveal of Demerzel as ETO and daneel, as well as Cheddar, someone who was also a big impact in the creation of psychohistory in the books. And I do like how they're still playing with the idea of what Demerzel would do with her freedom. If she would actually work to fight for humanity, or she would try to take them down. This segues us to a really amazing scene between Torin and Randu Mallow. This felt like a very solid payoff to the heartwarming scene we got of them in their previous episode together on Haven. And it seems, off camera, Randu got infected by the Mule, which means it's likely that any other characters out there in that scenario are also infected by the Mule. It does leave you to question though, when did these people get infected by the Mule if he was up in space on the Black Tongue? Well, I will tell you there's one scene tethering all of these characters together if you really think about it. Some really clever dialogue here with Randu still advocating for everything he would have advocated for in the past. And I really like Torin's response here.
Finally got a way to make the bastards pay up. Yeah, crack the world open, prizes inside.
Just this one little quip in rebuttal really helps solidify Torin as a character. I saw some comments when these characters were first introduced that they were kind of coming off as annoying. And I feel this is really helping put some more depth to who they really are deep down. Yes, they are entertainers and galactic influencers, but they're not blind, naive, or stupid to what's going on. I think they just had a problem with being blissfully ignorant to some of the things going on around them, choosing to do so as they probably felt like they didn't have much control. You gotta remember, Torin grew up from a perspective of being underneath Foundation's thumb, and Beta grew up on the Outer Reach. On a jump past planet, maybe on a planet called Rossum, where Beta was actually related to the Bartons, or even Beta being the Mule's little sister? Wait a minute. I want to reiterate once again how they took such an unorthodox path to get to what could be seen as a cliche scene. I think anybody could tell Randu, as soon as he was revealed to be infected by the Mule, was doomed to potentially die. But with his death being to the actual pressure gauges releasing on the escape pod, I don't know, I thought that was just a really creative usage of a character's demise. Either way, R.I.P. Randu Mallow. We then cut back to another cute brother Dusk and Quint scene. And I'm actually really beginning to enjoy the dynamic between these two. Why did he do that? I got nothing here. I'm presuming this is genetic decline, but I also believe there's a very real possibility that he's just overwhelmed with stress. He's been fearing his upcoming demise for a while, and with the Empire's approaching decline, he can't even be sure that his legacy will live on or even be remembered. This, coupled with the fact that Brother Dude basically bounced after rejecting him, Demrazel doesn't seem to care about any of his worries, and Brother Dawn is supposedly dead, I think this moment is him taking some form of control. I think this is just a Cleon pushed to their limits. And honestly, this scene was more horrifying than any of the previous Cleons and their constant blowing up of planets. And with Gale's vision of floating around a black hole, a lot of comments believe that the sack of Trantor will actually end with Brother Dusk using the Navacula on Trantor itself. Sort of a last FU to everybody involved for the decline of the genetic dynasty. Kinda going out with a bang if you think about it. Brother Dude then made Sunmaster 18, whose aesthetic is definitely on par with someone who could go toe-to-toe in a scene with Lee Pace as the Emperor. And I will say that staff with the robot head on it is absolutely badass. And, potential spoiler warning going off of the trailer footage, but I could swear we've seen the same head on this staff in Demrazel's hands later in the footage. Which means Brother Dude either steals this robot head, and it actually does possess some special property as in capable of speaking or some sort of functioning of some kind, or maybe he's just taking it as proof. Either way, he's the ruler of Mycojin, and for anyone who's seen Arcane, it seems he's sort of the Silco of Trantor, as in he's the real leader in everything in the lower levels, and those up top barely even know about it. Either way, it leaves you to wonder what could actually happen between these two, and what kind of questions the inheritance will have for Brother Dude. It seems he's finally seeing Demrazel from a different light, but I don't really know if that's necessarily a good thing. I still think Demrazel is kinda gonna be an issue for humanity in the end, and it's Kalle we should be relying upon for our own safety. Or at least assured destiny. But who knows, maybe they're working together to take us down in one giant wombo combo move. I'll be discussing that in my upcoming Kalle and Demrazel video I have coming out soon. So to tie back to what I said earlier, in the books, the planet Rossum is actually where they set up the Mule in order to inevitably take him down. Well, essentially the Second Foundation used this planet to trick the Mule. So introducing it now as the Mule's home world is an interesting strategy, whether it is actually real or even a lie. Either way, I really enjoyed this episode. I feel like each storyline is finally hitting their stride, and I do want to give a shout out to Terrence Mann, who is absolutely killing it as Brother Dusk. As he does with every season, but this season in particular, he's brought such a different vibe to the character. I don't feel sympathy for everything he's going through just because he is kind of a piece of crap, or at least I've always seen him that way. And his desperation for survival, for me, is just sort of payment for all of the horrible actions Cleons have taken in the past. And the closer he got to that ferret, the more I actually started to dig the character. And with what ended up happening with him, I don't know, that was the most shocking scene of the whole episode for me. By the way, what did you guys think of the episode? How do you think the interaction between the Mule and Harry Seldon will go next week? Will Torin come across Han Pritchard and they both team up with maybe Gale to presumably take down the Mule? And who do you think is likely to actually make it out of Season 3 alive? As it seems with Season 4, we'll be getting the sack of Trantor, and potentially the end of the first real arc of Foundation's narrative. But either way, thank you for your support, appreciate the feedback, and remember to pour one out for that tiny little ferret.